In the heart of Jalisco, Mexico, a grim discovery was made. A remote property, far from the public eye, held secrets of unimaginable horror. This site would soon become a symbol of Mexico's profound crisis of disappearance and violence. The location was identified as Rancho Izaguirre. It sits near the town of Teuchitlán, a place previously known more for its ancient archaeological sites than for modern atrocities. But the tranquility of the region was shattered by what was unearthed here. The discovery was not made by official investigators. It was found by civilian search groups, collectives formed by the desperate relatives of the missing. These families, failed by the state, took it upon themselves to search the fields and hillsides for any sign of their loved ones. When the initial findings from Rancho Izaguirre emerged, news reports were stark and immediate. The site was quickly dubbed the Mexican Auschwitz, a comparison that underscored the perceived scale and systematic nature of the horrors found. This label, though controversial, captured the initial shock and revulsion felt by many. The early portrayal painted a picture of a mass extermination site. It was believed to be a place where victims were brought specifically to be killed and disposed of on a large scale. This narrative was based on the initial evidence uncovered by the searchers. Among the most disturbing findings at the site were makeshift crematoria. These crude structures suggested a deliberate effort to destroy human remains, hindering identification and erasing the victim's existence. Their presence pointed to a systematic process of disposal. Alongside the crematoria, hundreds of abandoned personal belongings were scattered across the property. Shoes, clothing, backpacks, and other items lay strewn about, each piece a silent testament to a life cut short or violently interrupted. These objects spoke volumes about the victims. The sheer volume of these abandoned items was overwhelming. It suggested that a significant number of people had passed through this place, leaving behind the last vestiges of their everyday lives. Each shoe, each piece of clothing, represented a missing person, a grieving family. The discovery of Rancho Izaguirre and its contents sparked immediate outrage. For the families of the disappeared, it ignited a fresh wave of grief and anguish. It confirmed their worst fears about the fate of their loved ones and the brutal reality of cartel violence. The images from the ranch resonated deeply across the country. They brought the abstract statistics of disappearance into horrifying focus, showing the physical evidence of the violence that consumes so many lives. The site became a stark monument to the crisis. Give a like and subscribe. Leave a comment. The discovery at Rancho Izaguirre did more than just reveal a single horrific location. It starkly highlighted the perceived inaction and failure of the Mexican government in addressing the crisis of forced disappearances. It put the spotlight back on the state's inability or unwillingness to protect its citizens. The site became a grim symbol of Mexico's soaring number of disappearances. For years, families have reported loved ones missing, often with little effective response from authorities. The scale of the problem is immense and continues to grow. Estimates place the number of disappeared individuals in Mexico at over 120,000. This staggering figure represents a national tragedy, a vast population of people whose fates are unknown, leaving countless families in perpetual agony. Each number is a person, a story, a void. The images of the abandoned items at Rancho Izaguirre resonated deeply with these families. They saw in those scattered shoes and clothes a reflection of their own missing relatives. It was a tangible, heartbreaking representation of the lives that had vanished. These findings symbolized the fate of countless missing individuals across Mexico. They suggested a pattern of abduction, confinement, and likely death, a fate that families had long feared but for which they lacked concrete evidence. The ranch provided that horrifying evidence. The discovery prompted desperate searches by families for clues among the recovered items. They hoped against hope that a familiar shoe, a specific piece of clothing, might offer a link to their missing loved one, providing at least a fragment of truth. This search was fueled by desperation. For these families, the ranch was not just a crime scene. It was a potential graveyard holding the answers they had been seeking for years. Their willingness to sift through the grim remnants underscored the depth of their pain and the state's failure to provide justice or even basic information. The context of the discovery is inseparable from the broader crisis. Rancho Izaguirre is not an isolated incident but a symptom of a systemic problem where organized crime operates with impunity and the state struggles, or fails, to protect its population and investigate crimes effectively. The initial portrayal of the site as a mass extermination center, while later contested by authorities, reflected the public's understanding of the scale of violence. It highlighted the fear that such places existed, hidden away, processing victims on an industrial scale. The family's role in the discovery is crucial. It demonstrates the vacuum left by official investigations. When the state does not search, the families must, often putting themselves at risk to uncover the truth that authorities seem unable or unwilling to find. Following the initial shock and media frenzy, the official narrative regarding Rancho Izaguirre began to shift. This change in description from authorities created immediate tension and distrust with the civilian search groups who made the discovery. The state's interpretation diverged significantly from the family's grim findings. Authorities now claim the ranch was primarily a training ground for cartel operatives. This revised explanation suggests its main function was preparing recruits for criminal activities, rather than solely being a site for mass killings. It downplays the scale of extermination. Under this new official narrative, authorities deny it was a mass killing site in the way initially portrayed. They dispute the idea that hundreds were systematically murdered and disposed of there. This denial directly contradicts the initial public perception and the family's fears. However, authorities do acknowledge potential instances of torture and homicide occurred at the ranch. While denying it was primarily a death camp, they concede that individuals may have been killed or subjected to violence on the property. This partial admission offers little comfort. This shifting official stance is met with skepticism and challenge from the search groups. These groups were the first on the ground, the ones who saw the evidence firsthand. Their experience and findings lead them to question the state's revised assessment. Search groups maintain they found charred bones and other evidence of human remains scattered across the site. They argue that the presence of these remains, particularly in conjunction with the crematoria, points strongly to the disposal of human bodies on a significant scale. Their claims are based on tangible, albeit fragmented, evidence. The discrepancy between the official narrative and the search group's claims fuels distrust. Families feel that authorities are attempting to minimize the horror of the site, perhaps to manage public perception or avoid confronting the full implications of such a discovery. This perceived downplaying is deeply hurtful. The search group's perspective is rooted in their direct traumatic experience at the site. They witnessed the extent of the abandoned belongings and the physical evidence of burning. Their interpretation is informed by the heartbreaking reality they encountered. The official narrative, on the other hand, is presented as the result of ongoing investigation and forensic analysis. However, the slow pace and lack of transparency surrounding this analysis contribute to the skepticism. Families question why the initial, horrifying findings are being walked back. This conflict in narratives is not unique to the Teuchitlán case. It reflects a broader pattern in Mexico, where official accounts of violence and disappearance often differ from the experiences and findings of victims' families and human rights advocates. It highlights a fundamental disconnect. The search group's insistence on their findings is an act of resistance. They refuse to let the official version erase what they saw and what they believe happened to their loved ones. Their voice remains critical in challenging the state's portrayal of the crisis. The investigation into Rancho Izaguirre is described as ongoing. However, for the family seeking answers, the pace feels agonizingly slow. The complexity of the site and the potential scale of the crimes demand a thorough process, but the lack of swift, decisive action adds to the pain. The investigation has revealed arrests related to the ranch's operation. These arrests represent concrete steps, but they also raise further questions about the network behind the site and the extent of complicity. The focus has been on key figures believed to be involved. Among those arrested is the Teuchitlán mayor, José Asuncion Murguía. The arrest of a municipal official in connection with a cartel site sends a chilling message about the penetration of organized crime into local government structures. It suggests corruption at a fundamental level. Also arrested was a figure identified as a cartel recruiter, José Gregorio Hermida, known by the alias Comandante Lastra. recruiters play a crucial role in the cartel's operations, bringing in new members, sometimes through coercion or deception. His arrest points to the operational side of the ranch. The mayor is accused of being on the cartel payroll and acting as an accomplice. This accusation suggests that the operation at Rancho Izaguirre may have benefited from official protection or willful ignorance. It highlights the intertwining of criminal power and political authority. The recruiter, Comandante Lastra, has been identified as a ringleader and the boss of the ranch operation. This suggests he was in charge of the day-to-day activities at the site, potentially overseeing training, confinement, and other illicit activities. His role is central to understanding the ranch's function. These arrests, while significant, are just one part of a much larger picture. They point to the individuals directly involved, but do not necessarily dismantle the entire structure that allowed such a site to operate. The investigation needs to go deeper. The details emerging from the investigation, though limited, confirm the site's connection to organized crime. They validate the search group's initial fears that the ranch was not merely abandoned land, but a place actively used by criminal elements for nefarious purposes. However, the investigation details publicly released often remain vague, leaving families and the public wanting more information. The lack of transparency surrounding the process fuels speculation and distrust, hindering confidence in the authorities' commitment to uncovering the full truth. The focus on arrests is important, but equally critical is the forensic analysis of the site itself. The thorough examination of the property, the recovered items, and any potential human remains is essential for building a complete picture of what transpired there and identifying victims. The investigation's progress is closely watched by families and human rights groups. They demand accountability not only for those who operated the ranch, but also for any officials who may have facilitated or ignored its existence. Justice requires addressing both the perpetrators and their enablers. The investigation's slow pace and lack of definitive answers exacerbate the pain of the families of the disappeared. Each day without closure is another day of agonizing uncertainty. The delay in processing evidence feels like a delay in acknowledging their suffering. The slow identification process of recovered items adds to this torment. Families wait anxiously, hoping that one of the hundreds of found objects might be linked to their loved one. But the process is lengthy and complex, requiring careful forensic work and comparison with missing persons databases. This prolonged uncertainty leaves many families in limbo, unable to find closure. They cannot mourn properly without knowing the fate of their relatives. The state of not knowing is a form of ongoing torture, a wound that cannot heal. The case of Gerardo Diaz exemplifies this frustration and anguish. His family, like so many others, searches tirelessly, clinging to any potential clue. Their story is a microcosm of the larger crisis, illustrating the personal cost of the widespread violence and disappearance. Authorities' lack of communication and action is often perceived by families as mocking or ignoring their plight. When information is scarce, contradictory, or slow to arrive, it feels like their pain is not a priority. This lack of empathy deepens the rift between citizens and the state. The Teuchitlán case underscores a pervasive sense of betrayal felt by many Mexicans, particularly the families of victims. They feel abandoned by the institutions that are supposed to protect them and deliver justice. The discovery at the ranch solidified this feeling of being left alone to confront unimaginable evil. The case highlights the deep-seated distrust of authorities in Mexico. Decades of corruption, impunity, and ineffective law enforcement have eroded public confidence. Discoveries like Rancho Izaguirre, coupled with shifting official narratives, only serve to deepen this skepticism. It reflects the intertwining of organized crime and government corruption. The arrest of a mayor in connection with a cartel site is a stark illustration of how deeply criminal networks have infiltrated state structures. This complicity makes the search for justice even more challenging. Families are left to navigate a complex and painful search for truth and justice largely on their own. They form collectives, conduct their own searches, and push for investigations, often facing danger and indifference. Their resilience is remarkable, born out of necessity. The legacy of Rancho Izaguirre is not just the horror of the site itself, but the questions it leaves unanswered and the pain it continues to inflict. It stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of organized crime and the urgent need for accountability, transparency, and genuine support for the victims and their families. The search for truth continues.